Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In the late 1950s, a seemingly ordinary house in Toronto, Canada, became the epicentre of extraordinary events that would challenge the scientific worldview of one of its inhabitants for decades to come. This is the story of Morris Sabanski and his family, whose lives were inextricably changed by their experiences in a home shrouded in mystery. Morris Sabanski was raised into a secular household. As he grew older, he would go on to earn 2 degrees in chemistry and 1 in engineering. Later, he would lecture at the university level and work as a management consultant. But long before he became a man of science, young Morris was exposed to phenomena that would plant seeds of doubt in his rational mind. The Sabanski family moved into their new home in Toronto in the late 1950s. It was a typical suburban dwelling, one of about 50 or 60 identical houses in a small enclave. The 2-storey structure had a basement, a ground floor with a large living room and kitchen, and an upper floor with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. A gravel driveway ran alongside the house, serving as an informal alarm system during the warmer months, when visitors' footsteps could be heard crunching on the loose stones. Toronto's harsh climate meant that for much of the year the house was blanketed in snow and bitter cold. But it wasn't long before the Sabanskis realised that the true chill in their home came from something other than the Canadian winter. The first signs were subtle. Doors would open and close by themselves, an occurrence the family initially attributed to drafts or the house settling. But as time went on, it became clear that something far stranger was at work. The doors couldn't have just swung open. They would latch shut with a decisive click, requiring someone or something to turn the knob and open them again. Lights flickered on and off without anyone touching the switches. Footsteps echoed through the house, particularly on the stairs and the upper landing near the bedrooms. At first, the family tried to rationalise these events, but as the occurrences became more frequent and undeniable, they were forced to accept that their home harboured secrets beyond their understanding. One of the most persistent and perplexing phenomena centred around the upstairs bathroom. With a household of 7, Morris, his parents and his 4 sisters, the morning rush for the bathroom was always chaotic. But on many occasions, the family found themselves waiting outside a locked bathroom door, hearing the sounds of water splashing and movement inside, only to discover that no one was actually in there. Morris recalled these incidents vividly. We'd all be standing outside the bathroom twiddling our thumbs, and there's nobody in there. The door's locked, we can hear water splashing around inside, we can hear movement inside, all the kinds of things and noises associated with doing one's morning thing in there. The trouble is, we looked around. There's Mum, there's Dad, there's 5 kids standing around outside the door, and we'd say, well, who is in the bathroom? This ghostly morning routine would often last for 5 to 10 minutes before the noises would stop, the bathroom door would open by itself, and the family would find the room empty, but not unused. Water would be splashed around the sink, puddles would dot the floor, and the towels would be damp. As the years passed, the Sabanskis came to understand that their home was inhabited by not 1, but 2 distinct spectral entities. The first, more regimented ghost, which they dubbed Ghost Number 1, seemed to be a harmless, albeit persistent presence. Years later, Morris would learn that this spirit was likely an elderly man who had once lived in the house and hadn't quite grasped the concept of his own passing. The second entity, however, was far more sinister. The family came to believe that this spirit was the ghost of a Jesuit priest, a conclusion they reached based on its behaviour, the historical location of the house, and the rare glimpses they caught of its apparition. Morris's curiosity about the house's history led him to speak with a member of the local historical society some years after he had moved out. He learned that the area where their housing tract stood had once been the site of a Jesuit mission centuries before. The mission had met a violent end when local Indigenous people, fed up with the Jesuits' presence, attacked and burned it to the ground, extinguishing all the inhabitants. The exact location of the mission was lost to time, but given the topography of the area, it was likely that the Sabanski home stood on or near the site of this tragic event. This historical context gave new meaning to the terrifying experiences the family, particularly Morris's sisters, had endured. Often one of the girls would arrive home and refuse to enter the house, sitting on the front steps in freezing temperatures rather than step inside. Something about the atmosphere inside filled them with an inexplicable dread. The family's German shepherd, affectionately named Doggy, seemed particularly attuned to the presence of this malevolent spirit. The dog would often sleep in the upstairs hallway between the bedrooms and the staircase landing. On numerous occasions, Doggy would suddenly wake up, hackles raised and teeth bared, growling and barking at an invisible intruder. The family could see nothing, but it was clear that their dog was reacting to something beyond their perception. Morris himself experienced this overwhelming sense of dread only once. Years after moving out, he was house-sitting for his mother and needed to retrieve some tools from the basement. As he opened the basement door, he was struck by an overpowering feeling of terror. Despite his military background and generally unshakable nature, Morris found himself unable to descend the stairs. He closed the door and left, only to return hours later to find the feeling had dissipated. However, the most chilling encounter with this entity occurred one other night when Morris was again staying at the house while his mother was away. He awoke to the sensation of something pulling at his foot. Initially dismissing it as a dream, he tried to go back to sleep, but the tugging persisted, becoming more insistent until Morris finally sat up, fully awake. The room was dimly lit by the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the large picture window. As Morris's eyes adjusted to the gloom, he was struck by the unmistakable presence of a figure standing at the foot of his bed. It was a tall, shadowy silhouette, dressed in a broad-brimmed hat and a cape that draped from its shoulders in a distinctive A shape. No features were visible. All Morris could see was its jet-black silhouette, so stark against the dim light that there was no doubt it was real. The figure stood there, utterly still. For several long moments, Morris and the apparition watched each other in silence. Then, slowly, the figure began to fade. It became increasingly transparent until it disappeared entirely, leaving Morris alone in the room, shaken but certain of what he had witnessed. This sighting confirmed what Morris's sisters had been claiming for years. They had often woken to find a similar figure standing at the foot of their beds, watching them as they slept. The family's collective experiences, combined with the historical information about the Jesuit mission, led them to conclude that this was the spirit of one of the slain priests, able or unwilling to leave the site of his violent demise. But the Jesuits' presence was more than just unsettling, it was dangerous. The family learned to be wary when Doggy exhibited signs of the spirit's presence, which had begun to show a frightening ability to physically interact with the living. This became terrifyingly clear one day when one of Morris's sisters was violently pushed down the stairs by an unseen force. She had been standing at the top of the staircase when she felt a powerful shove from behind. The push was so forceful that she was propelled through the air, falling the entire length of the stairs before crashing onto the bottom step. The fall resulted in a broken arm and numerous other injuries. Given that they had just witnessed signs of the entity's presence moments before, the family had no doubt that the malevolent spirit was responsible for the attack. After this incident, the Sabanskis became even more cautious. When they sensed the presence of the Jesuit spirit, they took extra precautions, especially near the staircase. They would hold onto the handrail and avoid lingering on the landing. As Morris put it, once you've been pushed down the stairs, you tend to remember that. The paranormal activity in the house was a near daily occurrence. Doors opening and closing, lights and appliances turning on and off, and taps running by themselves became background noise to the family's everyday life. But occasionally an event would occur that was impossible to ignore. One such incident happened years later when Morris was again house-sitting for his mother. He had stopped by the house late one evening to check on things and decided to watch the news before heading home. As he sat in an armchair in the living room, his attention was drawn to a set of folding doors about 10 feet away. These doors were difficult to open under normal circumstances. They slid over an old deep pile rug that, despite years of wear, still provided significant resistance. Opening the doors required a good deal of force, certainly more than could be attributed to a draft or the settling of the house. As Morris watched TV, he heard the doors rattle. He glanced over but saw nothing unusual. A few minutes later, the rattling came again, more insistent this time. To his astonishment, Morris watched as the doors slowly opened by themselves, remained open for about 10 seconds, and then closed off again. But the most inexplicable event was yet to come. A couple of weeks later, Morris received a call from his mother asking him to come over immediately. When he arrived, she led him to the living room and pointed at the floor. There, clearly visible on the worn carpet, was a set of footprints. The footprints began at the folding doors and travelled diagonally across the room to the centre of the far wall. What made them truly remarkable was their appearance. The old rug, its pile long since flattened by years of foot traffic, had somehow been restored to its original plush state along the path of the footprints. Even more bizarre was the nature of the prints themselves. One was clearly the imprint of a cavalry boot, complete with a distinct heel and square toe. The other was a bare foot, with 5 toes, the pad of the foot, the arch, and the heel all clearly defined. These footprints remained visible for months, observed by numerous visitors to the house. They defied explanation and resisted all attempts to flatten them back into the worn carpet. It was only after several months of normal foot traffic that they finally began to fade. For Morris Sabanski, a man trained in the rigours of scientific scrutiny, these experiences posed a profound challenge to his worldview. If it hadn't been for the experiences that I had growing up in that house in Toronto, which exposed me to a somewhat different view of the world, I probably wouldn't be thinking what I'm thinking now, he reflected years later. The events in the Toronto house opened Morris's mind to possibilities beyond the realm of conventional science. It led him to question not only the current scientific dogma, but also those who espoused it. As he later became familiar with many of the strange paradoxes within quantum mechanics, a theory which describes the behaviour of particles at and below the scale of atoms, he began to see potential explanations for the incomprehensible events of his youth. Morris's experiences left him in a state of open-minded uncertainty. "I'm not sure whether I'm a believer or what," he admitted. "All I can say is I've experienced a number of phenomena. I have seen a number of things. I don't know what those things mean. I don't know what those things were. There could be a psychological aberration on my part. I accept that. But if someone can show me that, fine, I'll accept that. But at the moment, I'm at a point where I can say, I've seen this, I've experienced this, I don't know what it is. I have no explanation for it, but I can start speculating." The Sabanski family's haunted house in Toronto was sold in 1995. Morris doesn't know if the current residents have experienced anything similar to what his family endured for decades. But the impact of those years continues to shape his worldview, serving as a constant reminder that there are still mysteries in the world that defy our current understanding. As Morris Sabanski, now 75 and living in Australia, feeds the wild king parrots and kookaburras that visit his deck, he carries with him the memories of those unfathomable events. They have instilled in him a sense of wonder and a willingness to question even the most fundamental scientific principles. For Morris, the universe remains a place of mystery and potential, where the boundary between the everyday and the seemingly impossible is far more permeable than most people realise.